Titanfall 3 would be one of the most anticipated FPS games to ever come out in the history of video games. It is already such a big deal in the gaming community that there are countless just bait YouTube videos that are literally just farming free views just off saying, "Oh, maybe Titanfall 3 will happen one day and I'm lying to you, but who cares? Please click on my video." And that's all it is. Also, the current AAA shooter market just seems to be perfectly posed for Titanfall 3. So everybody hopes to one day see the next entrance into the series. But one thing I've noticed recently is everyone's expectations for what would be the next title in the Titanfall franchise is extraordinarily high. And this comes from just how critically acclaimed Titanfall 2 is and how beloved it is by the community in retrospect to its release, and also just how much of a gaming titan Apex Legends has become. So now we have extremely high expectations for the next game in this franchise. But we all remember what happened the last time we had extremely high expectations for the next game in a franchise, don't we? So the question is, if Titanfall 3 were to ever finally release to the public, would it be able to live up to the hype surrounding it, or would it be just another case of disappointment like we are seeing all too much from these major games nowadays? This is a thought that has been bouncing around in the Titanfall community for a while now, and most of the veterans believe that if Titanfall 3 were to be made today, it wouldn't be able to live up to the hype at all, and it would honestly just be a shell of what the franchise once was to us. And they have a lot of valid points. Today's Respawn is made up of almost an entirely different team of people than the original Respawn that made Titanfall 1 and Titanfall 2. Also, the other main worry is that Titanfall 3, if it were ever to come into fruition, would probably remove all of the movement mechanics within the game, as seen by how much Apex just decimates movement mechanics, or how much of Apex is a downgrade in terms of movement from Titanfall 2. And by removing all that, that would just remove the main identity of the Titanfall franchise. But those are really the main doubts that the Titanfall community and the veterans really have about Titanfall 3. They're really just worried about Titanfall 3 becoming an extremely watered down version of Titanfall 2, or just even worse, becoming a completely just rebranded version of Apex. That is our living hell. But I'm not just here to say bad things and be a negative YouTuber. Respawn, despite being a much larger team now, despite only having a fraction of the original Titanfall devs left, despite still being owned by EA, despite Vince also heading up DICE and having to oversee the Battlefield franchise, and so he has a whole lot more on his plate, despite being EA's main pay pig and having all that pressure on them. What was I talking about again? Anyways, despite growing and changing a lot, Respawn still knows how to make a good video game. It is a team comprised of good devs that seem like good people. They have good vision for games overall, and they are now well versed in live service games and keeping players retained in one game for an extended period of time. So Respawn as a dev team has a lot of positives and a lot of negatives about them. And do I think they could create a Titanfall 3 experience that would live up to the hype and high expectations that the FPS community has about it? Maybe. I genuinely think they could make an amazing Titanfall 3, but there are a ton of obstacles and different things that they would have to balance their focus around and be extremely careful about who they're pissing off and who they're making happy, and it is going to be very difficult for them to do. So, what would an ideal Titanfall 3 look like to me? Well, of course, I am a Titanfall 2 fan, so I am biased, but I think that Titanfall 3 should follow the Titanfall 2 formula. And I don't only say this because I love Titanfall 2, I also think the market for FPS games is in general posed for a return to form for the arcade shooter. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, despite all the issues with Warzone and all the different issues they've been having, is at the end of the day a arcade shooter with a campaign and a multiplayer, and it has performed amazingly well. It was the best-selling COD of all time. And I think Titanfall 3 could be that return to form and that return to fun that we all really want from FPS games nowadays. But again, like I was saying, I think Titanfall 3 should follow that Titanfall 2 formula. Titanfall 3 should have a amazing and very story-driven single-player campaign game paired with a robust multiplayer experience. I also think that the multiplayer experience should remain an arcade shooter and just be the generic modes for that, like TDM and CTF and those modes. The market is out there for that, and I'm fully convinced of that because, especially considering how the battle royale and extraction shooter fatigue is really kicking in. It feels like every single new extraction shooter that has been announced recently has been met with more groans than cheers recently. This would also allow for Titanfall 3 and Apex to live in harmony with one another. Have one offer the classic arcade shooter, the TDM and the CTF and the hardpoints modes, and have the other one offer the battle royale experience. That way they are living together and you don't have to wait for Apex to die off before you start developing Titanfall 3. That's insane. So that would be the general game model for Titanfall 3. But what about the things that are actually important and would actually make the game live up to all these high expectations that we have for it? Of course, I'm talking about the gameplay here. Gameplay is the most important part of Titanfall 3 because gameplay always has been and always will be the single most important part of every single Respawn game ever. The first thing I want to talk about is one of the most important elements of any single FPS game, and of course, that is the gunplay. Respawn as a whole has been working with and building the same sandbox of weapons over the course of 3 separate games, and every single iteration has been amazing. So pretty much no matter what, the weapons and the gunplay that comes with them will be great. The only requirement about this though is that since the game will be returning to arcade shooterland, we need to see the return of hit scan weapons. They would need to make the ARs and the SMGs and whatever else they need to hit scan again, because in this setting it operates much better and is much more satisfying than having every single weapon be a projectile weapon. But overall, I trust Respawn when it comes to the gunplay, and I have extreme confidence in them making a satisfying and fun experience when it comes to the weapons of the game. They also already have all the abilities in Titanfall 2, not to mention all the new ones from Apex, and can rework those to function however they need to for Titanfall 3. The main thing for me when it comes to the abilities in Titanfall 3 is that Respawn just needs to not nerf them into the ground. The game should be about fun, not about restricting every single thing that players do for the sake of balance. For example, okay, maybe you can nerf the grapple down to 1 charge, but keep it so that you can fling yourself across the map like a pilot, not like Pathfinder. And also, don't put a giant cooldown timer on it either. You should be able to grapple frequently and have fun doing so. Now we need to talk about what would probably be the most important part of Titanfall 3. The movement. The movement in this game needs to be good, fluid, and fast. Respawn needs to replicate the feeling that you get from Titanfall 2 of being a pilot with excellent traversal abilities. And of course, I am not saying that the movement needs to be exactly the same as it is in Titanfall 2. That would be insane. But it does need to be more advanced and more fast-paced than Apex is. Wall running should be pretty much almost exactly the same. I can already think of a few tweaks that I would like to see to it, but there are no needed major changes to wall running. The base sprinting speed has to be faster than Apex, or at least the first-person animations need to be sped up for it. Because if I play Titanfall, then I move over to Apex, I feel like I filled my boots with lead and then swam across the Atlantic Ocean because I feel like I'm just running so slowly. Also, this went without saying, but the movement needs to be momentum based, and we need a good way to carry momentum in Titanfall 3. I don't care if it's beat hopping, I don't care if it's slide hopping, I don't care if it's something new, but we need a way to carry momentum and consistently go fast in this video game. I feel like this momentum conservation and this act of maintaining speed is what really makes Titanfall feel like Titanfall. Not to mention all the backlash I've seen recently and how much fun I had in both the Battlefield 2042 and the Modern Warfare 2 betas, where you could kind of hop around and had some sort of base movement speed that felt good in both of those betas. But then by the time the games were fully released, they had completely axed and torn down those abilities to somewhat conserve your speed. And that just took about half of the fun away of those games for me. And I know that that opinion is shared by many others. This is probably the part that I am the most worried about when it comes to Titanfall 3, the movement, because Respawn kind of has a track record as of late of nerfing everything movement related. They even tried to remove tap strafing in Apex Legends, even though that didn't really go that well for them. And the industry as a whole seems to be extremely against anything movement related nowadays. And in order for Titanfall 3 to succeed, I think Respawn would have to at least somewhat re-embrace movement and allow us to go fast again. And not only through this niche movement tech that we see a lot in Apex nowadays, where you have to watch a 15-minute tutorial on how to do something just to spend hours in the firing range practicing it, just to maybe sometimes get a just small little burst of speed. We should be able to go fast with just the basic movement mechanics. But if Respawn were to ever finally give us a Titanfall 3, they would have a very difficult time trying to appease the long-term Titanfall franchise fans and also convince the normal Apex Legends fans to play the game consistently. But if Respawn did somehow figure out that perfect balance and do hopefully most of what I talked about in this video, I think Titanfall 3 does have that small chance of living up to the expectations that we have built up for the game. Also, no matter what, Titanfall 3 would sell amazingly well. Respawn just has too much brand recognition at this point, and following up Apex Legends, every single FPS gamer will buy that game pretty much no matter what. So I wouldn't be worried about that part of it. But that's just what I think. Overall, I think Respawn would probably have a very difficult time trying to balance everything about the game and live up to the expectations and the hype around the Titanfall 3, especially when they're missing most of the devs that made the original games. But overall, I do think it is possible for them to do. And I really hope they do it one day. Let me know what you think in the comments though, of course, and subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that stuff. There's a link in the description where you can find everywhere I push out content. I stream on Twitch, you should follow me there, and on Twitter, all that good stuff. Thank you very much for watching, it really does mean a lot. GG's, and goodbye.